Welcome back, minors. My name is Amber Johnston, and I'm a counselor here at Student Wellbeing.
And my name is Tracy Kriegel. I'm a counselor here at Student Wellbeing. And it's time for your morning cup of joe.
So this week, Tracy, I want to talk about autism. What do you know about autism?
Well, I have worked with autistic children in the past, but personally, I don't know, I've never experienced having children with autism myself. My neighbor, his children have autism, and I have a friend who has autistic children. So, but working with kids, I have experienced, working with children who have autism.
Well, this is an issue that's very near and dear to my heart as a parent of a child who's on the spectrum myself. So I wanted to kind of go over with everybody that's listening what autism is and kind of go over some people in pop culture who may or may not have it, that have symptoms, and then kind of leave you to decide. Some of them are indicated in the canon of the show that they're in as having to being on the spectrum, and then other individuals it's never disclosed one way or the other. But we, because of the nature of the university that we work at, there is a little bit higher prevalence of individuals on the spectrum here at this university.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So I wanted to kind of talk about it and some of the symptoms and everything that go with it. So originally, I wanted to link this to Sheldon and the Big Bang Theory, as it's been widely speculated that he is on the spectrum. But the producers of the show have refused to pathologize him and say if he has it or if he doesn't, because it's not really important to the show overall. However, after I thought about that, I decided to kind of branch out and cover some of the other characters in the other shows, because Sheldon, I feel like, is almost comically, like I think a lot of his is done exaggerated for comedic effect, where I wanted to look into some of the characters that were done more for realistic purposes. And so let's first kind of go over some of the symptoms of autism. So do you want to
I think
through the symptoms?
Yeah, I think it's important that people understand what are the symptoms of autism. So it's commonly associated with communication and social issues. So they have difficulty with socially interacting with others, the difficulty with social interactions. They can make themselves, it's difficult to understand social cues.
Oh, yes.
So like for some people, they can understand when their peers are talking or give that social cues. Well, with people who are on the spectrum, not always do they understand that it's my turn to talk in the conversation, or when it is to initiate that conversation, or some of those different social cues are very hard for them. So nonverbal signals, like the conversation is over, this is uncomfortable and that can be missed. So sometimes the conversation goes on and on
or
and
it's
on.
Really an uncomfortable topic,
Yeah.
and then they really don't understand that the conversation's uncomfortable. So you can see everybody's kind of looking away and not making eye contact and trying to end the conversation. And the individual on the spectrum can sometimes, depending on how their symptoms show, they may keep that conversation going beyond the point that it's to the point that it's very awkward.
Sure, exactly. And some people, on the autistic spectrum don't know how to initiate a conversation at all.
Yes.
So they may be in the room and they may not say anything because they don't know how to initiate a conversation. So
absolutely.
They can feel like they can feel like you're having different conversations. And so they have difficulty with maintaining appropriate eye contact. So they may not have that eye contact with people.
And it might be too much, or it might be too little, right. Because eye contact is a very natural type thing that happens, and it's typically, in case you've ever wondered, it should be about 3 to 5 seconds at a time. When somebody is difficult, if that switch is turned where they don't know what feels normal to them, what they'll do is they'll either overcompensate by making way too much eye contact to show that they're engaged, which then makes the other person like they're staring at me, or they don't want the eye contact because it makes them uncomfortable, so they won't maintain eye contact to begin with. So it's kind of a one end or the other.
Right, exactly. So when I said earlier about difficulty in starting and maintaining conversation, the speed and rhythm of the conversation can feel off for them. So that can be really difficult. Maybe having a flat affect or an emotional expression may be different. So whereas someone may, in a conversation, be emotionally expressive, they may not have that same emotional expression.
Or they may sing. Yeah. Like they may sing their phrases, and so you'll hear the end of their phrases come up at the end, like everything's either a question or there's like a sing-songy voice to it, or everything's monotone. Yeah. It's those either of those speech patterns are pretty common.
Right, and sometimes they can come off either as too passive, so it may not look like they're engaging with you, or they can come off too as aggressive, so they may be kind of in your face.
Well, and too firm. It's because you get this is the way it is. No, bedtime is 8 o'clock. That's what time bedtime is. I don't care that it's we're doing this other thing. It's bedtime right now. We need to go home, and this is the way it is. Right. It's that very firm, very strict, everything has to be the way that it is. And sometimes it can feel to others almost controlling, but it's not really. It's how they perceive the world.
Right, sure. So along with that verbal communication difficulty, they also may struggle with speech or writing, but they may excel in math or science. So these other subjects may be their strong points. So with that communication, that may be the difficult part, but with math and science, they really excel in those areas. So these are those really strong points for them. So there is, some really strong areas that they can excel in. Difficulties in that eye contact, again, I mentioned. So in the tone, it may be a monotone or a singy-songy. They alternate between the two. The tone or volume can be inappropriate for the setting. And then sometimes they might be whispery. And they might, in a concert, they might be whispery in that concert, which may be inappropriate for the concert because they might need to be louder. But then they might be in a funeral and they might be yelling.
Yes.
And it's just that social context of where they are might be inappropriate for the context of where they're supposed to be at. Or anything in between, so trying to figure out where they're supposed to be at. Difficulties in understanding sarcasm or puns.
Yes.
Might be difficult in trying to understand that. So those are some of those things. Often difficulty with sensory processing needs. Those may be difficult for them. Repetitive movements may be, so that constant rocking may be an issue for them.
Or the arm flapping. Which when you say arm flapping, that brings to a certain picture, and it doesn't look like what it sounds like. Generally, it's just your hand is kind of in front of you, and it's kind of waving and shaking, and that's most commonly how I've seen it. It's just like a shaking of a hand in front of the person.
Sure. When I was thinking of sensory needs when I was younger, I'm older, but we had a young kid in my church, and he could not stand the sounds and the volume. It was so loud, and so he always had to wear headphones because the sounds of the music was way too loud.
Right.
So the only way he could handle, being present was to wear headphones. Because the sound was just too loud for him. So his mom and I had talked, and that was an intervention we used to help him be able to manage the sound being too much for him. And he managed being there because the sound was just too overwhelming for him. Right. So that's how he managed to process the sensory needs and so, I think that's important for people to know if you are on the spectrum, especially if you're in class, and if something's too loud for you, make sure you're communicating that to your professor, if you need to wear headphones or earphones, make sure you're processing that. So back to, sorry, I sidetracked.
Well, in sensory processing needs aren't exclusive to just autism. So even though if you're not on the spectrum, if you notice you're having any of these sensory needs or something, please say something to somebody and we can see if we can get you some help. But there can be, like you were talking about, sensitivity to sounds. Like some common ones that I hear and that I've heard in my life have been halogen lights.
Yes.
And hearing the hum of the lights being distracting to the point of causing the person to have difficulty functioning. I've also heard the sounds of those TVs. There's certain types of TVs that produce electric hum to the point that you have to unplug them because them just, even if they're not on, just being plugged in can produce a hum that's distracting. So if you come across any of these needs within yourself, again, that's not necessarily being on the spectrum doesn't mean that you have every single one of these symptoms. That's why it's a spectrum, because you can have one of them and you can have this over here, or you might have this over here, but nobody has all of them, and they don't all look the same. But sensory processing disorder falls into the autism spectrum, but it isn't autism. It's a separate thing.
Right, it's the actual sensory processing. So back to kind of where we were at before I sidetracked. Apologize.
I had to sidetrack too.
I'm good at that. So some of the other rhythmic movements that they do, flicking caps and pins, or not that they do, that we, autistic folks do, flicking caps and pins.
And repeating certain phrases, the echolalia, which is huge. So you'll hear them sometimes, if you've ever seen the movie Rain Man, they show that, which it's like, I'm not advocating that movie as a example. That's a good representation of echolalia because he is repeating the same phrases over and over and over again.
Right.
So it's been a long time since I've seen that movie, so I don't know like how accurate it is otherwise than that. I haven't seen it since I was a child, but I remember enough about it that I know there was a lot of repeated phrases.
Yeah, so watching the same movie over, so repetitive behaviors, so watching the same show or watching the same movie over and over and over again because they just get focused, on that one subject, that one, same.
Well, like I said, I have a child that's on the spectrum, and we at one point were watching the same 45 seconds of a cartoon for 2 hours. Wow. It was the same 45 seconds. On repeat.
So that, and that caught his attention, so he was hyper focused on that one thing. So so then there's also sensory understimulation, so touching things or certain textures. It can be, difficult. Chewing on things can be difficult. Vibration. Also, overstimulation. Too much sensory input is present. Particular sounds, which we mentioned early. The noise-canceling headphones can be helpful, which I already mentioned. Also, limiting food preferences can be a piece that is helpful, right?
Well, often you have a lot of individuals that are on the spectrum have very limited food choices. So they'll want foods that fit within certain categories. So it might be a particular color. They might like only foods that are crunchy. A lot of times there's a heavy interest in things that are heavily processed because they're uniform. Whereas like your fresh fruits and vegetables aren't uniform. Like you never know if you bite into an apple, is this going to be sweet or is it going to be tart? Whereas if I eat a Cheez-It, the Cheez-It tastes the same, the first Cheez-It to the 1000th Cheez-It. That's the way it was explained to me in one of the classes that I had to take. So you find a heavy preference for those processed foods, and especially the blander ones, not heavily spiced, so you're very limited. And again, this is not every individual that's on the spectrum. It's just a little bit more common than in the general public.
Gotcha. Okay. So touch sensitivity can lead to issues with clothing textures.
Yes. You'll see that a lot with t-shirts and socks, like only certain t-shirts without tags, or the socks, the seam on the socks will have to be lined up perfectly with their toes, or they will have a difficulty in handling that.
Gotcha. So things that can be helpful are like alternating certain fabrics can be soothing.
Yes.
Weighted blankets, I've seen that to be very helpful for a lot of folks. So that's things that we can utilize as a therapeutic approach.
Yes.
To helping people who are having the touch sensitivity.
Yes.
So and that aversion to touch can be an issue. They don't want to touch certain items, and then if those things come into contact with them, it's like, yikes. Ouch, go away. So some of the things, they have rigid routines and a difficult adjusting to an alternate routine. So that can be an issue that people on the spectrum, have a great difficulty with. And so, if I'm used to getting up and at 8 o'clock and doing something, and then at 12 o'clock I do something, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, if that routine starts to vary, then there could be a behavior disruption, especially when you're younger. But as you get older, integrating into a new routine, that can also be very stressful for someone who is on the spectrum. So, and then you're dealing with symptoms of anxiety and stress, and can also lead to depression. So finding a routine, I think that is helpful. That's where that piece is.
Well, and the comfort items, those are huge especially for individuals that are on the spectrum. They'll have certain things that are comforting to them. So it varies on the person to person what items they find comforting. But you'll see things like fidgets. They'll have a particular fidget that they'll be fond of, or they will have a particular keychain. Sometimes it's a little square of fabric. I've seen that. I've seen in younger individuals dolls, like a particular doll or stuffed animal that provides comfort. Sometimes it could be anything. It could be a rock. It just depends on what that person is bonded to. So it could be using a certain cup and a plate. Like I've seen individuals that were that had a particular cup, plate, and bowl that they ate out of at every meal. That's what they ate out of, and it was those particular utensils that they used every single time. So it's paying attention to those things that bring comfort, because they have that need for that constant everything staying the same. And like I said, with this whole list of symptoms, there's not going to be anybody that fits every single one of them. Like, this is, again, a spectrum, and you're going to be points of, that fits, oh, well, that doesn't fit, oh, well, that fits, and oh, that doesn't fit. And that's okay. Again, it's a spectrum, and we all fit, like, everybody that's on it fits into it differently. So you're going to have people, like, to name some famous people, go off the top of my head, did you know Dan Aykroyd?
I did not know that.
I had heard
Ghostbusters.
Yes. Yeah. And I heard Daryl Hannah too, but can't confirm that. But I had heard that they are on the spectrum. So let's talk about some examples. Okay. So the first one that we talked about was Dr. Sheldon Cooper from Big Bang Theory. He definitely shows the rigid schedule needs. He's got the spot. He's got to have a spot. And then there's a scene where he comes out and Penny is making French toast. And he tells her it smells good, and he says it's too bad that it's oatmeal day. And then he takes the French toast and he dumps it in the trash and makes oatmeal, because it was oatmeal day. It wasn't French toast day. Leonard had to buy takeout boxes at one point because the only restaurant that Sheldon would eat Chinese food from closed, and so he had to buy specific takeout boxes and transfer it from another restaurant into these takeout boxes in order to bring them to Sheldon, so Sheldon didn't know the only place he would eat at had closed. And so then once he figured that out, he had to adjust to eating this other place, and he grew upset because they didn't serve the egg rolls in the right number. Like there were too many egg rolls in a serving.
Right.
And so it threw everything off. Then you have the roommate agreement that he created, where he's got this strict set of rules. Like, so everything with him is just very regimented. I've got to eat the same things on the same days of the week from the same restaurants, and I have to follow by these rules, and we go to the bathroom at a certain time, and we take a shower at a certain time, and everything has to be done. And again, this is comic. Like, the degree to which they go into is more severe than I've ever witnessed in anyone that I've come across. And it's kind of exaggerated for comedic effect, which is why not my favorite example of somebody on the spectrum, but it is an easy one that most people can kind of see.
Right, and I think that's what TV does. TV, it shows the comical effect, but I think the underlying, what you're trying to bring out is, if you look at the structure, the rigidity, the routine,
yes,
and I think that's what you're bringing to light, which I think is helping us understand what is that spectrum and what does that look like.
Yes.
And,
we're looking at, I wanted to bring light to the underlying behaviors, not the degree to which those behaviors exist in this individual. So he also has difficulties with sarcasm and puns. He's very literal. Like, Leonard has to literally make a sign that says sarcasm that he holds up so Sheldon will know when somebody's being sarcastic. Like, he literally had to make a sign. And so it's a running joke that he doesn't get the sarcasm. But is that a real symptom of being on the spectrum? Absolutely. Low social awareness. He has difficulty with like nonverbal cues, and so people say stuff and he just doesn't get that they're like essentially in the show making fun of him, and he doesn't get it because he lacks that social awareness. Not that it's ever okay to make fun of somebody in those situations, but it shows you in that, again, it was for comedic effect. He missed what was happening. Very flat affect. So when he does have expression, it's normally a little bit exaggerated because it's on purpose. So when he tries to smile, it comes across very disconcerting because it's not natural. It doesn't feel natural. He has an aversion to being touched. There's very much food issues there, and we have, of course, his obsession with trains, and to the point of having them talking about the sizes and obsessing about trains.
I've watched a couple episodes. I think probably in our house we don't watch a lot of primetime TV, but the episodes I have seen of Sheldon, the one thing I've gleaned from that TV show is he's very brilliant.
Yes.
And I think that's the one thing I have found from him, and his mom and dad, really take caution, care, and concern about him. But there are people in his environment who really, they do take care and caution, not caution, but care and compassion for him.
Right.
But I really appreciated the episodes I did see because he is very brilliant.
Right.
Within his own self. And the things he's doing, he's very conscientious of, the things he does do.
Right.
And I think he has a lot to put in to the things he does. So that's the thing I really appreciated about what the TV show does do, is that he has so many positive attributes, but even though they have comedic effect, there's so many positive attributes that he does have.
Yes,
so I think
he does.
That's the nice
and
part.
There's a common misconception with some individuals about autism, and they think that if somebody is higher functioning, as in and I don't even like that word. I don't like higher functioning, but for somebody who is able to work in society and have a job and go out and do the things that they need to do on a daily basis, and they see that and they don't think that person has severity of their symptoms. That's why I don't like the term higher functioning, because their struggle is different. So you've got some people that their autism, it affects their IQ more, and so their symptoms might be more readily apparent to other individuals, where you have some other other people that their symptoms aren't as readily apparent. And so does that make their struggle not a struggle? No, it absolutely doesn't. I mean, if you've ever talked to somebody that struggles with the sound of a halogen light, like, you really understand that can be extremely painful and very traumatic for them. So yeah, like, it's understanding how big of the spectrum it is and how much it encompasses so many different people.
It does. Yeah, absolutely.
So my next example is one of my absolute favorite in television, where I'm not, like, Sheldon Cooper's not my favorite example of autism. Brick Heck from The Middle is absolutely one of my favorites. Brick has echolalia. He does repetitions. So after somebody says something, he then takes what they said and then he whispers it under his breath. He looks down and away, and then he'll whisper it. So if you said the train is coming, he'll go, coming, and then whisper it. And so that's that echolalia. So it's he whoops and ticks sometimes, so he definitely has the tics, which is the stemming that we talked about, that sensory need and filling those, and we refer to that as stemming. So you definitely see him doing that repeated sensory needs. He has difficulties with social situations. He decides that he needs friends, so he goes to his mom at one point and asks his mother to make him friends. And he doesn't understand why that's not appropriate. Like, I need friends. My mom is the one who does things for me. Mom, you go make me friends. This is what I need. So, and then there's another one that I absolutely love. He'll be in the middle of having a conversation. He'll be like, I'm done talking with you now. And then he turns around and walks away. I love it.
That's great.
I love it. There's an episode where he goes to class and he decides that he needs more friends. And so again, we're back to he's decided he wants to make friends. So he goes and he plans a birthday party. So he goes and he invites all of his classmates to come to his house for a birthday party, and comes home and tells his mom, we're having a birthday party, by the way. And he planned all the activities. He planned this all himself. And his activity that he planned for all these kids was reading.
Love it.
He's going to have
a reading party.
He's going to see that lack of social awareness, not understanding that all the other kids aren't going to be as enthusiastic about his preferred activity. And his preferred activity was reading. Now, that goes counter to what we talked about earlier about the verbal skills. But again, not everybody fits all of the criteria. So for Brick, he had very good verbal skills, and so he was very into reading, and his activity that he wanted to do with all of his friends was reading.
Right.
So he definitely speaks in the monotone voice. Very much difficulty with reading nonverbal cues and sarcasm. Has a huge obsession with fonts and libraries. And reading, and to the point that he played librarian with one of the other kids, and the way that works is that he would read and the other child would read in the same room, and they would just be quiet and then tell him when it was time for the library to close.
How fun.
So like I said, he's one of my favorite examples. They never explicitly say in the show that he is on the spectrum. Like, it's implied at one point, but I don't know that they ever come out and say that I'm aware of that he is on the spectrum. But definitely some signs there that he possibly could be.
Gotcha.
My next example is Temprence Brenan from the TV show Bones. And this is not the books. The Temprence Brenan from the books is very much not... does not show symptoms of being on the spectrum, but the Temprence Brenan from the TV show shows some symptoms. Again, this is one that, like Sheldon Cooper, is very exaggerated. This one not for comedic effect, but I don't know if they were going for dramatic. Like, I'm not quite sure, but it's very exaggerated and characterized. But again, I wanted to bring it up because of some of the symptoms, and we can kind of see it. Just keep in mind that they are very exaggerated.
Gotcha. TV's good at that.
Yes, very much. So again, flat affect, monotone voice with Tempe. She has a lack of interest in social situations and an interest in her interest in social norms is like an observer. So she likes to overanalyze the social situations, kind of like reminds me kind of like the alligator. The crocodile hunter.
Oh, okay.
Steve Irwin. Reminds me of Steve Irwin, just like kind of sitting back and watching this whole thing going on without the excitement.
Gotcha.
So she's very much just observing these things going on and very blunt in the way that she talks about it, to the point that it makes people very uncomfortable. She has difficulty understanding emotions to the point of just being blunt. Like, she made her partner extremely angry and did not understand why, because she compared his religious beliefs to voodoo.
Oh.
And really vastly offended him.
Right.
And so he was very, very hurt and very upset, and she just didn't get it, because to her,
she was just comparing two things.
yes.
Yeah.
And it's the reason why she lost out on a promotion, because she lacked tact. And so the job for the head of the forensic division for the Jeffersonian, which is the place that she works in the show Bones, it went to another person, because that person had more ability to be tactful and be politicky than she did. Booth frequently tells her that she stinks at nonverbal communication. Like, that's, like, you hear him say that, I can't tell you how many times. She very much has difficulties with sarcasm and is often very literal. She interprets metaphors literally and misses pop culture references. Like, she made a mistake of confusing Colin Farrell and Will Ferrell.
Oh, yeah.
and totally different actors there,
Yeah.
but she had them confused because their last names are both Farrell.
Sure.
She is obsessive focus. Like, when she gets started in a case, she would obsessively focus on the case, going over it hours and hours and hours and hours again, and very rigid in her schedule and her norms and her routines. And my last example is Dr. Shaun Murphy from The Good Doctor. And this is another one of those examples I like. And I really like Shaun Murphy as an example because he's human. I love it because he's not aspirational. He has good points. He has flaws. He has everything in between. Like, he has depth to him. Yeah, like, he's one of my absolute favorites on television. I don't feel like he's overly characterized. I've heard some criticism because he's a non-spectrum actor playing an individual that's on the spectrum, but I love the fact that he's diagnosed and that it's part of his character.
Yes.
Whereas Tempe and Brick and Sheldon were not. This is the only one that we're talking about today that has an official diagnosis. But he has dementia. He's a person beyond his autism in the show. Him being on the spectrum it shows his struggles and successes, like the gifts it brings him and the struggles he faces, but it's not his entire identity, and I love that. And this is pretty revolutionary in my opinion. I can't think of another TV show that had that kind of depth to a character that's on the spectrum. So he has difficulties in maintaining eye contact, especially when he's stressed or tired, which is typical, like 100% typical right there. He makes inappropriate statements in his responses in social situations. He can be blunt to the point of being offensive. Like, he say things that are really offensive to people. And doesn't understand why those things are hurtful. He can see that someone's hurt, but has a hard time figuring out why they're hurt. Like, he he has this doctor that kind of raised him, and is like a mentor father figure to him, and he observes that he doesn't need to be driving anymore, so he gets his driver's license revoked and then doesn't understand why the doctor is mad that he took his driver's license away. And he's like, well, you didn't need to drive anymore because it wasn't safe, and didn't understand the connection with the feelings there. He very much has difficulties with physical touch. He gets very overwhelmed in certain situations, and I love the fact that we see with him a real meltdown. So for those of you who aren't familiar, individuals on the spectrum, when they become overstimulated, sometimes can have what are called meltdowns. And with there was specifically an episode where some buzzing lights caused him to have a meltdown, which for him was he collapsed on the floor into kind of a fetal position and was unable to function. And it's something that can happen for a variety of situations when that overwhelm happens. So I like that was shown. And showing him trying to deal with the fact of knowing that he has a propensity for these to happen in these situations and adapting to it. So that I loved that. He has a flat affect and a monotone voice, but he also goes to the sing-songy version too. And of course we have the standard difficulty with puns and sarcasm, and very literal about his speech. And he has difficulties adapting to changes in his routine. He eats the same breakfast every day, a green apple and yogurt. He uses the bathroom at exactly 5:06 every day, just very on a routine. And he has a fixation. His comfort device, like we talked about before, is a toy scalpel that he carries with him everywhere, that his brother had given him. So when I say like these comfort devices, I love the fact that he is shown having a comfort item and that he carries with him. I absolutely love that. So if you think you might be on the spectrum, like, now what? And it really depends on what you want or need. Some people live without a diagnosis, and others need accommodations. And you'll need to be evaluated by somebody that can diagnose. And this is one of the situations that student well-being, we can't diagnose, we'll have to outsource. And often we can help you locate someplace to be able to talk to them about a diagnosis. Having a diagnosis can allow the student to work with your student accessibility for certain reasonable accommodations. And let's say you don't want a diagnosis right now, or you're looking for some management techniques. Keeping your sensory needs in check is an easy one. So limit your overstimulation, remove yourself from overly loud environments, headphones, earplugs, allow yourself time to unmask. And so in the spectrum, masking is what we do when we're in public, and it's how we function by hiding the symptoms that we may have on a regular basis. And so it's like a mask that you put on to go in and interact with the rest of the world. So when somebody is on the spectrum, they have to make sure and give themselves time to, like I said, unmask, pull that mask off every single day. During unmasking times, you should be able to stim freely, do some of those sensory needs, take care of those, engage in and without concern of interruption or anybody will judge you. Just be allowed to be yourself and allow yourself movement time, just regularly through the day. Carry your comfort objects nearby, like a favorite fidget. Have your comfort foods with you. So maybe not all of them. I mean, macaroni and cheese doesn't travel that well.
Right.
But if you've got a favorite cookie or something, carrying it in your backpack as a comfort item can help. So having those snacks and such, so that if you get hungry, you don't have to try to find a place that has food that is friendly for your requirements.
hey, now Velveeta cheese does make those little packets that you can carry with you that you put the little cup of water in.
Absolutely.
Those are easy to make.
I carry them in my purse. Just FYI.
Yeah.
Trust me.
Right.
Like I am good on the autism snacks. Like I keep them stocked.
Right. Just saying.
But you got to carry them with you. You've got to have so like for my stash, I've got the macaroni and cheese. I have fruit snacks. I've got a couple things that I carry with me, just to make sure that my kiddos always got something that's available. And so I highly recommend bring those with you, so that when you're out in public and all of your friends want to go over for blah 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 place to eat, and there's nothing you can eat there, or you're stuck eating bread, you have something that you can prepare for yourself.
Right.
So it's makes life a little bit easier. Or find a place to keep them, or note places you can find them when you're away from home. Carry earplugs or headphones with you. But overall, the biggest thing I can tell you is just be kind to yourself. So that was a whole lot.
That's okay.
I think this is our longest episode so far.
That's okay. I think it's a very important episode, because I hear and I see people feel like they're lost. And I would never want anyone to feel like they're lost in the crowd, or that they're isolated and alone. And I think, go ahead, Amber.
And it's absolutely a superpower in some ways. And in addition to it having challenges, it definitely brings assets. And so, you feel like you're alone, but it also, it's not something that's wrong with you.
No, it's not. It's who you are.
Yes.
And you take those wonderful capabilities and qualities, and you put them to work for you.
Yes.
Yeah. And like you said, take the earplugs, take those things that you need to make yourself be successful, and that's who you are. Like, you use the good doctor. He was a doctor.
Yes.
I mean, there are people who have these disorders, and I don't even look at them really as disorders. I mean, unfortunately, we put labels on things, but it's just who you are.
Yes.
And you take those things and you make them who you are. You function within them. We make accommodations. We make the accommodations to make us be successful, but that's what we do. We make ourselves successful, and we look at what our resources are. We're here at Student Wellbeing, and we help people try to be successful every day, whether it's coming for counseling, whether it's groups, whether it's, whatever you need. There's, case management. It's I know there's a different name for them now. It's student services and community. I can't think what the name of them are right now. My brain just...
Student success and community standards?
Yes. And so, if you're needing, help finding a resource in the community, there are people who can help. And I think that's the key in this on campus is, what do you need?
Yes.
What do you need to be successful? That's the whole reason we are here. So we appreciate you tuning into this podcast, to find whatever you need. And if you need more, reach out and call us over here at Student Wellbeing.
Okay. Well, thank you guys for joining us, and have a great day. For more information about mental health and wellness, contact Student Wellbeing at 204 Norwood Hall. And you can also give us a call at 573-341-4211.
The song Happy Days is brought to us by music from www.free-stock-music.com. You can also add and follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook using our handle at S&T Wellbeing.